Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast, a podcast about how to grow your business from $100,000 and beyond in the land of the rising sun.
Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Bettino, and on today's episode, we have Robert Purse. Robert is the founder and managing director of McLaren Group, a bilingual end-to-end marketing consultancy based in Tokyo. Their services include marketing strategy, consumer research, marketing plan execution, and business development. Over the past 15 years, Robert has worked for various marketing roles in Tokyo for global giants including Nielsen, Reckitt, and Preferred Van Mel, servicing and managing a host of global consumer brands. He recently appeared on our podcast to discuss marketing agencies in Japan and how to choose the right agency for your company, which will feature in the show notes. And in today's episode, he's going to talk about market research for small to medium enterprises in Japan. In particular, he'll discuss when and how SMEs can engage in market research and what resources are available in Japan. And so we've did a good introduction into market research in our episode with Andrew Edsall, and we hope to go much deeper with Robert Purse here. Before we start, here's a quick introduction to myself, your host. I'm the CEO of LaunchLab. We support setting up a company and back office in Japan. We also provide affordable advisory on raising capital, IPO, and other finance topics. I also run Scaling Your Company that provides courses and sales advisory and digital marketing agency services for the Japan market. If you need help, feel free to reach out. Okay, Robert, it's good to have you on for the third time. Or maybe for the first time listeners, if they didn't hear your episode on marketing agencies, could you please give an introduction?
In marketing agencies, we just sort of covered, what different agencies exist in Japan and the pros and cons of each of those. Also in the context of business size. So if you're a large organization or an SME and what kind of companies you can engage with and the benefits of that. So yeah, please check it out if you get a chance.
Yeah, and every time we talk about marketing or market research or consumers, I'm always impressed by like how deep and detailed your knowledge and experience is. So really look forward to diving in.
Yeah, great.
Could you just tell us what is market research?
Yeah, sure. Just, classic definition, but to set the context, I guess, market research is a strategic tool used by businesses to understand consumer behavior, market trends, and competitive dynamics. You may have heard consumer research or insights, but I think market research is a bit more of a catch-all term. And things like online surveys, focus groups, social listening, these are all included in the definition of market research.
Gotcha. And yeah, I think when we're discussing, the normal answer is why do you need it is like, well, if you want to know what you're getting into, it's good to know. But I liked how you had a really deep way of phrasing it and like just the way you framed it, like it just really connected to me. So why would you say that a company would need market research?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's been really interesting for me in my career because I started my career in a research agency. So I was in Nielsen and a smaller agency before that in Australia. But then I went on to the other side of the table. So I went client side and became like a research buyer. So that whole transition has been really interesting to see, to go from the position where it would always frustrate me actually, but you'd be making research for clients and you kind of give them your findings and make a presentation, but then you wouldn't actually really know like how that was being actioned or what they were doing with that. So then when I was on the other side of the table, it was fascinating for me to finally see that other part of the journey, so to speak. But anyway, what I've found is there's basically two main ways in which research is being used. The first one is the exploratory. So this is where like you actually need the research to make a decision. So you kind of relying on that data to validate your hypothesis or whatnot to move forward, which is definitely the recommended one. But the other one is, I just call it explanatory. And this is more about like justifying decisions that have already been made. And the dirty reality, let's say, is in a lot of companies, like a lot of the research that's being done is actually the latter. So it's doing research to kind of justify decisions and work backwards a bit. And there's a whole host of reasons why this is the case, but yeah, just to let everyone in on a bit of a dirty secret that's actually happening.
Yeah, I was like, I never had a term for it, but like when you mentioned it, it was really interesting for me because or my first career, I was more in HR management, and a
Yeah.
lot of decisions were made like, we didn't consult with the staff at the at
Right,
the entry
right.
level, first level, and we have to think of like, how can we sell this? We don't have a decision here, like we have to do it, but how can we
Yeah.
make it less painful? How can we create a good storyline?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I
And
mean, it serves its purpose. You know what I mean? And I think, especially, I know you did this sales pitch thing as well, Tyson, sales materials development. But I think from that point of view, it can be very effective. You know what I mean? Like, especially when you're selling to Japanese consumers, they like numbers and they like data. So, even though some decision may have been made, or you're gonna go in some direction, then you can work backwards and be like, oh, hey, here's all the data about why that's going to kind of work. So yeah, it does serve its purpose.
now it's I can put a framework or a terminology to it. Boss
Yeah,
makes decision. I have no choice. I have to do it. How do I get
yeah,
it? How can I explain it?
yeah,
And
exactly.
let's find a reason. Okay,
Yeah.
but so yeah, let's dive more into exploratory research.
Yeah, for sure. So, exploratory, yeah, this is more like when you're actually relying on the data to make a decision, and a lot of times too, this is kind of to justify a hypothesis you have, which is also, that's a good thing. Not to just rely 100% on your gut. It can almost be like a sense check in some senses. So yeah, basically we kind of touched on this idea before, Tyson, but I'm really interested in the idea of the sell in and the sell out phases. So like obviously the sell in is all about getting eyeballs on your product or service, right? So whether that's getting it online or whether that's getting it on a shelf, that's all about the sell in. That's a massive achievement to be able to do that, especially if you're launching a product freshly. But you can't forget about the sell out phase, right? So actually kind of appealing to those eyeballs, yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you're not achieving that piece of the puzzle, then you're kind of dead in the water, right? Research can really support with both of these phases, especially that kind of sell out phase, to make sure that the consumer is really actually genuinely interested in that product and going to purchase it.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And even in the startup world, they have a whole concept called product market fit,
Yeah,
and you're basically spending probably the first to 2 years
yeah.
figuring out like what your customers actually want, but through more of
Mhm.
an organic process. But if you're a corporation, you can't spend 2 to 3 years trying to figure out what this next product is. So
Yeah, which is probably a good segue to the next part of this, I guess. Because obviously, the way that you use research would depend on the kind of business strategy you have and kind of business and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of that, I also try to simplify it in terms of, is your strategy all about a new product, like launching a new product in the market, which would probably fit with more like the startup type companies and whatnot? Or is it about like growing an existing product, or, you can't change the product, but you still need to grow the market? So maybe I could kind of talk about those two
yeah,
differences.
that would be excellent.
Okay, cool. So the first one, let's do the existing product, right? Again, this is quite simplistic because if you're working in an FMCG company, yeah, you're managing both at the same time, right? Like managing your existing product portfolio and then your NPDs on top, but you need to take care of both. My previous boss used to always talk about leaky buckets, right? Like, oh, you got
Ah,
to be
yes.
careful your leaking bucket, right? Because that's your existing product. Because even if you have a successful new product launch, you may have a leaky bucket, and then that's going to cancel it out, right?
Is NPD new product development, maybe?
Yeah. So basically, yes. So in terms of like existing product, if that's your strategy and you want to understand about that business, then research is basically going to help you to understand like what's working and what's not working, right? So what you can do is you can map out your sales purchase or sales funnel, and then try to understand where that bottleneck is. You might have different hypotheses along the way about what's going on, but research is going to help to verify these. And again, you can kind of use different types of research, which I'll jump into in a bit. But basically, based off of that, then you can jump back in and you can rework your 4P strategy. Is it an issue we have with the product, which could be the concept or it could be the communication of that concept? Or is it placement? Do we have a thing with distribution? Or is it price? You know what I mean? Or is it promotion? So, just kind of doing that work and mapping it out, but then really validating those hypotheses with research has great value, I think. And just sitting down, like physically mapping that out, it can be a bit arduous sometimes, but it just really gives you clarity. And then that connects back to all that strategy stuff we were talking about last time, which is like strategy is what you don't do, right? So once you've kind of mapped that out and you know where the bottleneck is, then you can be like, this is clearly what we're going to do. Like we could do this, this, and this, but we're actually going to focus on this. So now, how about I just quickly touch on the new products as well? So if you sort of like in this startup space or you're introducing a new product into the market, basically research is going to help you understand what opportunities exist if you're in the earlier stages of that product market fit. Where is the white space, all this kind of stuff. Or it can help you to verify a potential product that you actually maybe already have, but you're entering into a new market. So it's really simple things like, do consumers like the idea of the concept? Or if you have an actual product, do they like the actual product? Just it's kind of basic stuff, but it sort of comes back to that sell in, sell out thing. Like you need to make sure that if you're going to go to all the effort of selling it in, that it's going to be sold out. You know what I mean? You need to have both those pieces of the puzzle ready. And again, this is then going to inform that 4P strategy and your whole marketing and communications plan.
Gotcha. So if I had to summarize, I guess the two. So I guess for the existing product growth strategy, it'll be more focused on mapping out the current purchase funnel and where there's an issue or where's the bottleneck in terms of the product, where it's placed, the price, and how you're promoting it. Since you'll be working with professionals, they probably have a hypothesis or kind of an idea of where the issue is, and the market research would help them to verify that hypothesis.
Exactly. Yep.
Gotcha. But for a new product, you're really looking for new opportunities. Maybe, let's say, I think how you phrase like the white space, kind of like maybe the things that you weren't looking at possibly, but might actually be that. And then just once you kind of understand what the consumer likes or wants or needs, then you'll develop the 4P strategy of where should the product be, where should you place it, what should you price it, how you would promote it.
Exactly. And I think the other thing that this can basically inform, which I don't want to overcomplicate it, but the whole segment targeting and positioning as well. This can also help to inform that.
Yeah, I was thinking that was exactly like who is my target audience and how would I promote it in a way that would appeal to them.
Yeah. So basically, like if you have an existing product in market, then you basically already have an STP, or like it exists in some sense. And then this would help to go back and tweak that. So like help to identify where is the issue there as well, if there's an issue.
What is STP? Sorry.
Sorry, segment, target, and positioning. Sorry.
No, it's a good framework.
Yeah. Thanks for the summary there, Tyson. Hopefully that's clear for everyone.
Yeah, we can dive into research tools.
So yeah, I think sometimes research can be a bit scary. I think for SMEs, or there's image that it's super expensive and we can just do it in house or whatnot. Some of those things are true to an extent, maybe not the expensive bit now, but there are a lot of things you can do in house. And I'll sort of touch on some of those now.
Yeah, I think that's why I wanted to get you on today, because usually for me, or my belief is, I think sense can kind of get you 50 to 70% of the way, but you really need data and research to go the rest of the way. But I've been pretty lucky with just my sense. But when you said there's a possibility to do market research as a small business, I was all ears.
Yeah, I think as well too, like, if you're selling online, for example, if you're sort of more of a digital based business, then you do have access to a lot of data. Um, but I think a lot of times the data is not it's a lot of own data, you know what I mean? So it's about sort of your customers or things like that. And it might not be necessarily giving that more wider context. In addition, I think sometimes it can tell you the what, but maybe not the why. You know what I mean?
Like, for example, in the language school concept is, I mean, we have a very clear numbers on how many students are leaving. I mean, we do surveys asking them, but I would not be able to confidently say we know the why, even though we do
Yeah,
survey students.
exactly. And I mean, like when I was working at Mentos or most of these FMCG brands, they have the intage data. So you know all about the sales, right? You know the shares of all the competitors, the distribution of all your products, the offtake and all that sort of stuff. So you can track all that and you know what's going right, you know what's going wrong, but you don't know why, right? Digital data is a bit like that sometimes. Interestingly, Tyson, recently I've got quite a few RFQs from major data companies, let's say, or online companies, and they're looking at consumer behavior. For example, like LLM usage among teens and things like that, online token exchanges between different platforms. So that in and of itself clearly says that there's a limit, despite all the data that's online. There's kind of a limit to how deep insights can be gained. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's interesting because I would assume they have like data scientists, but you have a different probably angle that you could provide that maybe a data analyst can't provide.
Yeah, well, that's actually another really interesting point you raised there, Tyson, is managing data. Like the irony of data, let's say, without getting too philosophical about the whole thing. But, sometimes at the end of the day, every data needs to be interpreted. Let's just put it that way, right? So you can have like millions of billions of billions of data points, but someone has to interpret that and then figure out how to use it to take an action. And so I think that's totally true with this whole online world. And the way that we do that in FMCG is we'd have multiple data points, you know what I mean, from different sources. And then the job of the marketer was actually to kind of put those different sources together and make some conclusion and take some action based on that. So I think this kind of idea of marketing research is giving you more data points, you know what I mean, to be able to make those decisions rather than just
Mm.
basing off one data point 100%, even though there might be some overlap there.
Yeah, no, it makes sense being that if you rely on just one source, that can create
Mm,
bias in a way.
exactly.
By having more data points, it's reducing the likelihood of that bias.
Yeah, just to give you an interesting anecdote, one of my good friends was working with a neuro-based research company, and so they'd strap these people up to helmets and they'd watch TV ads or whatever, and they'd be like, "Yeah, we measure like 10,000 data points every second and and all this stuff." It's like, oh my god, all this data, that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, even though they had all these data points, someone had to basically sit down with the data and try to make sense of it because it actually wasn't that simple. So it became a whole like qualitative research experience at the end of the day rather than a quantitative one.
Hello, listeners. I'm excited to announce my live cohort course to help you increase your sales in Japan. Many foreigners struggle to turn first meetings into second meetings because they lack a sales pamphlet that follows the standard format in Japan. Even if you have a good first meeting, your internal contact will hand over your current sales pamphlet to the decision maker, and they'll take one look and say, they don't get Japan. My live 4 session cohort course will teach you how to make a sales pamphlet in English using the standard format in Japan. You will receive a sales pamphlet template, more than 10 examples from Japanese companies, and a lot of feedback so you can end the course with a sales pamphlet that gets more meetings and therefore more sales. Getting one extra deal will more than pay off the course, so joining is a no-brainer. You can find more details of the course at scalingyourcompany.com /sales pamphlet. And we'll have a link in the show notes. Could you dive into maybe a company has no or a little bit budget? What are some research they can do?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that the lowest hanging fruits, let's say, is just getting out there into the market. That can be both online and offline, but just try to do that through the lens of a consumer. I know when you work on a product or a brand, you can really get blindsided, let's say, or you sort of think that everyone else thinks about your brand like you do, which they clearly don't. Someone told me before when I was managing, I think it was Mentos, they said, "Hey, Rob, did you know that you are the only guy in the whole, probably in the whole world, who only thinks about Mentos in Japan every day?" And it's true, right? Like people just don't think about brands in that way. So it's always good to kind of take that step back and just try to be a regular consumer, you know what I mean? So another anecdotes, I guess, on that is, yeah, go out the market, go online, check the market, check the competitors, try to do that through a lens of a consumer, but also like use your product, you know what I mean, as a consumer. So me personally, I've worked on quite a lot of female personal products, as it turns out. So one of them was Veet, which is a hair removal brand. So yes, I've waxed my body multiple times. And Mediquito was a tights compression hosiery brand. So yes, I've worn female tights to bed and during the day. So I mean, I think there is there is a limit with that, which we won't go into too much detail. But as much as possible, I'd say, just fully jump in, and you'd actually
Right.
be surprised how many brand managers don't actually do that.
Yeah, it's I've been surprised how many people don't actually use their product. Or I liked how you described story where the comment was, you're probably the only person in the world who thinks about Mentos all day. And I mean, for me, I think if it was for a founder, I would think that's
Yeah.
a compliment. It's like, okay, it's cool. This person, they're serious. They actually believe what they say.
Then I'd say, like, just talk to people. You know what I mean? Like, I was a bit of a stalker, but sometimes I just go to the store, and if I saw someone looking at our product, I'd basically just like ask them a question. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's maybe a little extreme, but I mean, talk to people. Can actually you really open your eyes to things you maybe hadn't thought about.
Yeah, and I think this is something I always do. But I think it applies in two cases. Like, one, if you're running a company, just asking employees. So I had a chat with my employee
Mm.
today. I was like, how excited are you about this project today? We're
Yeah,
working on this project for the last, like 8 days. It's been pretty hard. Do you like it? Oh, I love it. I was like, oh, sweet.
yeah.
I thought maybe you won't like it as much as I do, but I guess you're more passionate than I am on it. So sweet.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you do need to be careful though, hey, about biases and stuff like that. Because I guess if you're like the boss Tyson and he knows that it's your company, he's probably more likely to say something positive. I'm sure he's not lying to you, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I would probably be able to tell.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. There's obviously that, but I mean, just in general, like if people knew that you're a brand manager of something, or this is the project you've been working on for like the last 1 year, you say, "Hey, what do you think about it?" Generally, people are probably going to be pretty nice and say, "Yeah, I think it's pretty good," even though in reality they're like, "Nah, definitely wouldn't want to buy that."
Yeah, we joke in startups. It's like, oh, so you're gonna buy?
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly. Anyway,
but
sorry, we
could you
we
dive a little
digress.
bit more into leading questions?
Yeah, so I think first of all, ideally you need to be not associated with the company. You know what I mean? Or they don't perceive you as being associated with the company or product or whatever it may be. They're more likely to be open about things. And I think, yeah, like leading questions is instead of saying, "Tell me about the product," or "What do you think about the product?" If you said like "Well, what do you like about the product?" You know what I mean? Like that's obviously being biased towards them liking it. Just sort of things like that. Like the main idea is to let them talk and very openly and just present very generic questions and kind of just go along with what they said and repeat it and all that sort of stuff. But that's a whole like profession, like moderation, like professional moderation, like the people, like I'm not a professional moderator, but these people who do it, they're amazing. You know what I mean? Like they remember what when they're doing a group like 6 people, they remember what everyone had said. They're always like checking and reconfirming what they have said. And they'll even pick up discrepancies like, oh, like 30 minutes ago you said something different and now you're saying this, and they'll recheck it with them. Like it's
Uh,
phenomenal, these professional moderators. Yeah.
I think you also mentioned like online data sources.
Yeah, so definitely see in this kind of small no budget space, there's a lot of resources there. A simple Google search, especially in Japan, and you need to do this in local language though. It is limited in English. Good English websites like Mintel, Statista, Euromonitor, which is normally like a freemium style. So they give you some data for free, but then you need to pay for a full report or something like that. In Japanese though, yeah, like if you can type Japanese or someone in your team can, then you'd actually be surprised what data you can find, and some of it's actually pretty good. You do need an eye for what is sort of robust data or not. One of the key things is the sample. Like I sort of touched on it a minute before, but research is all about sampling, right? Like you're not talking with every single one of the people who've bought your product or every single potential client or customer. You're just talking with a sample, right? So when you're looking at sort of data sources, you need to take a look at who is a sample, like who are they actually talking to? Maybe they're just talking with their customers. And then, of course, their customers are going to give a different rating to, say, their competitor customer or a more like general sample. So you do sort of, when you are looking at, even though there may be data out there, you do need to be careful of that.
And I think you also mentioned like, is it actually possible to get some industry reports without
Yeah.
having to pay?
Yeah, they're not too expensive, like a Fuji Keizai or something. I forget off the top of my head, but a few $100, you could probably get some, you could pay to get some reports. Yeah.
Not too pricey, but I think I've gotten some from Yano Research as well. They have
Mm-hmm.
industry specific ones in Japan.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
one was pretty useful. And
Yeah, no, those kind of research reports can actually give you quite a bit of insights because they'll touch on sort of obviously like the whole bigger market stuff, the channels, the competitors, but then some of them will even give you some consumer insights as well. So yeah, that's definitely an option for if you have a limited budget. Yeah.
okay, so let's say I talk to customers, I do Google research, find some free reports, get some decent
Mhm.
information, and I have some insights, but maybe I want to go a bit deeper. What would be
Yeah.
something more comprehensive?
Yeah, well, I think clearly compared to those, if you're actually going out there and you're doing your own research study, then that's just going to be way more robust. That's going to give you the confidence in your in confirming those hypotheses. So traditionally, there's like quantitative research and there's qualitative research. You may have heard that terminology, but quantitative or quant as it's called is more about those raw numbers. So understanding the what. Online surveys. You can do central location tests. There's a bunch of different ways to execute those. Well, then there's the qualitative, and this is more about understanding the why. This is a bit more exploratory. You would have heard of sort of focus groups. You can do expert interviews in like a B2B context to actually get insights from experts. And then more recently, there's this new wave of research methodologies leveraging AI, which is super interested and I'm really engaged with recently. And these tools are kind of blurring the boundaries between qual and quant. So they talk about this like qual at scale because obviously, like if you asked your partner how much they like you, you wouldn't say like, "Oh, tell me how much you like me on a scale of 1 to 10." You know what I mean? Like it's it's kind of weird. So these qual AI tools are kind of overcoming those issues with both quant and qual, and really sort of offering companies, especially SMEs, more cost effective, efficient ways to get quality data.
Yeah, it sounds interesting where the tools can help reduce the cost.
It's really interesting because it is cost, but it's also quality. So to give an example, I'm currently engaged with it's my client, but it's Bolt Chat AI is the name of the company, and they basically have this end-to-end platform, and the AI actually creates a discussion guide. So you input your, what kind of respondents you want to talk to, you input your basic objective, and then the AI creates a discussion guide for you based on those simple inputs. And it even recommends how you should change your objective, right? And then it goes out and it finds those people to talk to. It can be like 10 to 100 people, and it starts chatting with them like in a text-based chat. It understands what they're saying, it can reflect on it, it can probe just like a professional moderator would. And then once that's done, which can be done in any language, right, in anywhere around the world, it synthesizes the data and you get your report back in 24 hours.
Mind-blowingly fast, I'll say. So
Yeah,
how long
yeah.
would it typically take?
Yeah, so I mean, to put that side by side with the traditional qual approach, like for a study with even just 10 people, like that's going to take, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks. That's
Gotcha.
a minimum. Yeah.
Just
So
trying to
these
find the
kind of
right
like
people.
multi-country, multi-level, these kind of tools are just going to be getting like more sophisticated and whatnot from now. So yeah, I'm super happy to be working with these guys. And yeah, I mean, if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out and we could do a demo or anything. No problem.
One of the common challenges I see with my consulting clients is not having any staff internally who can drive marketing strategy and execution to the next level. This really limits the growth trajectory of a company, especially for a leader like you that wants to go from 30 million to 500 million yen a year and does not have the time to spend years learning through trial and error. To solve this problem, I'm launching a marketing agency that can help companies like yours to increase leads and closing rates through SEO, Google Maps, content marketing, and websites that convert. Head over to scalingyourcompany.com and book a free consultation. Let's talk about what your business needs are, where your current strategy is letting you down, and how we can help you see real results with the methods I've successfully implemented at multiple companies myself. Now, back to the episode. I do understand that market research is important. I guess from your experience, like, how much do big brands or
Mhm.
let's say, or successful medium or successful small businesses tend to spend on market research?
Yeah, this bigger business one I can answer. Small business one's a bit more tricky. Um, but for bigger companies, yeah, like they have very, very sophisticated research processes. So for example, like a P&G, they have these things called gate systems, like Procter and Gamble. Yeah, they have like gate systems. So at every stage of a new product development, you have to you'd have to do a certain study and you have to get a certain score, like above a benchmark, to be able to go to the next step. So they're like super rigorous in terms of like you literally can't launch a product unless, the concept has been validated and you have a score above whatever.
I feel that it would raise the level of the staff who actually execute these projects,
Mm.
having that framework and standards.
Yeah, where it falls down though, I don't know if someone's getting annoyed for me saying this, but I think where it falls down is the focus becomes on passing the test rather than the actual, like then that actually,
Gotcha.
and
So
nothing's perfect, right? So a lot of times they're just doing things because they know that will pass the test. Do you know what I mean? So I
no,
don't
that
think
makes
it's that
sense.
perfect.
Like, let's say you might not find the blockbuster idea.
Exactly, exactly. But hey, it's PNG. I think they're doing pretty well. So
Yeah.
who am I, right? But maybe just to add something to that, Tyson, and it might help with in more in the SME space. But so that's like one extreme, right? Is this like hardcore gate system, multiple stages of research, rah, rah. But I think, in my experience with research, I've sort of been at both ends of that scale as well. I've been in companies where they launch stuff without doing any research, for example. And I was like, wow, seriously? So there's definitely a sweet spot. And I'd say it's almost like an 80-20 kind of thing. You know what I mean? I think you'd probably get doing just like a 20% of the research, you'd probably get like 80% of the value is.
In your experience, what area kind of tends to be that 20%?
So yeah, I'd say definitely the higher level market landscape stuff that we were just talking about. Either you could do that through purchasing reports, going online, or you can engage in expert interviews. So I'd say definitely that one, just to understand the overall market context. And then I'm a massive fan of concept tests. And then ideally, if you have budget, a product test connect to that, or if you have a product already. So a concept test is basically you have this thing called a concept sheet, and it's like a 1-page sheet, and it has, what is the product or the service, what's the name of it, what's the benefit of it. Then you have like a consumer insight, which means basically like what's the pain point of the consumer it's trying to solve. And then you have an RTB, which is like reason to believe. So here's the benefit of the product, but why, how can this company or product or whatever deliver on that? You know what I mean? Like you need to give those details, otherwise people are not going to believe you. So for example, like if you are launching a new skincare product or something, and you'd be like, oh, it reduces wrinkles in 24 hours perfectly or something like that. That's great. I'm sure everyone would buy that, but is anyone going to believe it? So you need something in there that's going to say, because it's created by Dr. Blah, blah, blah. It's got this ingredient they found in space, or that's probably not so believable,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like just add those got aloe vera and some special plant they found, rah, rah. And anyway, that's your RTB. And then you have like a picture and you have a price. You basically show that to consumers and you say, would you buy it or not? Or on a scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to buy this? Back to your question that the startups might ask. It's the same idea, right? It's just doing it on like 1 page. And you show it to your potential consumer. Do you want to buy it or not? Right? And then you start to ask them why not, blah, blah, blah. So just a simple study like that can actually like just reveal a whole ton of information that you can reflect in your whole marketing strategy.
Gotcha. I think you also mentioned like talking to an expert.
Yeah, so that's more in the B2B space, I guess. But yeah, I mean, just like sitting down with experts. Like there's these recruitment companies who, not like a job recruiter, but like a market research recruiter. And these companies can get in touch with professionals across a whole range of industries. You can get a lot of insights by, setting up appointments with 3, 5, or experts. You know what I mean? And you can sit down with them, or a professional moderator would sit down with them and ask them specific questions. And that can actually tend to reveal a lot of insights. And then you can even share your specific product or service ideas, which is kind of like, it's the same idea as a concept test, but that's more from like a B2B point of view, because it would be difficult to do like a quant survey in a B2B
Gotcha. Yeah,
context. Yeah.
it makes sense. Interviewing the experts would kind of give
Mhm.
you the idea if you should pursue this or not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
like it is an opinion, but let's say at the end of the day, but again, you can select what kind of people you want to talk to. So, you can have people with more than 10 years experience, a buyer in a certain category, or rah, rah, rah. And, there are limits to how specific it can be, but the idea is if you're just going to talk to 3 to 5 people, then make sure you're really talking to people who can give you a lot of those insights.
Gotcha. Or one challenge is, I mean, a lot of their advice will be based on historical
Yeah.
performance or historic or things that happened in the past. But yeah, I guess if you're looking for something 5 to 10 years in the future, I guess the
Mm.
further in the future you go, probably the harder it is to ask for obvious reasons.
Yeah, but I mean, but back to my previous point, like just talking to people in an open way can often just, highlight things that you'd never sort of thought about, or give you new ideas, or, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, especially finding product ideas or finding, or I guess how I like to describe it, maybe friction in the customer experience that
Yep.
is decreasing the quality of the customer experience with
Mm-mm.
my service.
Yep, definitely.
So market research, There's many departments in the company like R&D, product development, but where is the budget typically held for market research?
Yeah, it's normally in marketing, I'd say. Well, I think if it's a bigger company, sometimes the R&D would also have a budget. In the digital world, is that's a bit more tricky to answer because, product development teams might also have, but from more of like a consumer FMCG, then that would be marketing or R&D, yeah.
Gotcha. So I think, Robert, you covered a lot of sources for doing market research. Could you share us a couple more key resources?
Yeah, sure, Tyson. So I think we sort of touched on different websites, but definitely government and trade websites. They can have some important regulatory and market data also. And, back to my point about sort of getting out there, talking to people, expert interviews. I mean, you can obviously engage experts in a formal way or in a more informal way by joining local business networks and associations. Sometimes you can connect with the right people and they might be able to give you some free advice, let's say, on your product or service.
Also, I guess one question that listeners might be asking themselves is maybe where can I find Japanese people to do some micro research on our behalf?
Right. Well, yeah, as I mentioned, like Japanese does help, definitely, obviously. So my company, we have a small team of in-house bilingual researchers, and we can manage these different type of micro projects, obviously with some kind of budget. But as I mentioned before, definitely we're jumping more into these AI style projects, so that sort of opens the opportunity for smaller scale projects while still maintaining that data quality and also speed, which I touched on.
What's the name of that software again?
Yeah, it's called Bolt Chat AI.
Gotcha.
We
Are
can
you the Japan representative for that?
Asia. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so like I said, it's a really amazing tool, and if anyone's interested, please reach out and I can set up a online demo for you anytime. And yeah, very happy to introduce that.
Yeah, the speed is really when you said 24 hours, I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, and without going into too much detail, Tyson, but another super cool function with that is once you have your data, you can actually go back onto the platform and you can chat with the data. So you can literally ask it any question about the data. Like even how would you improve this product, or give me a few product ideas based on this study, or like it's literally like chat GDP, but just looking into your data set. It's really something.
Yeah, it's like a living data set in a way.
Yeah, well, it's like a moderator. It's like just
Yeah.
they're there with you 24/7, can answer any question.
So you're a professional. Why should someone use your services as opposed to, I guess, DIY or try to do it in-house?
Like I said, there are ways to do it in-house. Let's say minimalist ways to do things in-house from research point of view. Like there's those resources and whatnot you talked about. But I guess, at the end of the day, obviously, if you engage a professional, you're going to get much more quality insights and quality data and just more robust validation of your hypothesis and identifying new areas for growth and things like that. So basically, what my company does is, because we're end to end marketing, we do the research, but it's not just about the research for us. It's about really helping the client turn those into actionable steps, and then even taking them through that whole journey and helping them to execute on that. That's kind of what we do and what we pride ourselves on. But in terms of sort of doing it by yourself, one thing I do notice that people kind of struggle with is basically like who to talk to. And it touches on that point I was talking about before, which is about sampling. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this is about sampling. So you always need to be thinking about, okay, who am I talking to here? Is that a current customer? Because if you're after sort of more general population insights, then if you're talking just with your customers, that's going to be super biased, right? So, and especially, so you always sort of need to keep that in mind, and you need to sort of filter results from that lens, if that makes sense.
I want to ask, like, so if I was interviewing, Japanese people,
Hmm.
Is there maybe any kind of quick tips you could give us for interviewing Japanese that might be different than maybe someone from a different country?
Japanese, Japanese very serious and like majime, right? So
Mhm.
a normal like research, if it was like a one-on-one interview, for example, that's going to be very formal and obviously from the language point of view, like it's all about keigo. It's about treating them very well. Um, and definitely it's about like listening to them and they're going to take time to open up, so it is about sort of setting the scene, and really making them feel comfortable to open up, which ties a bit back in what we were saying before. Like, if you went in there and be like, hey, I'm the guy from Mentos, tell me about Mentos, you know what I mean? They're going to be super nice to you, right? They're like, yeah, I love Mentos, you know? So, whereas if it's a foreign person, they might be like, "Oh, you're the guy that made that Mentos. God, I hate that new flavor. Like, what the hell are you thinking?" You know what I mean? So you're definitely not gonna get that from a Japanese person. And the other point maybe is with focus groups, right? Like if you have a group of people, then compared to the foreigners, like foreigners are kind of like jumping in and they'll start talking to each other, and the moderator's job is almost like to shut them up, right? It's like, hey, like stop talking to each other. But in Japan, that definitely doesn't happen, right? Like the moderator's job is more like to kind of pull the information out of people, and they need to ask them specifically, right? Like, hey, Mr. Tanaka, what did you think? And oh, Miss Nantaka, it's not free flowing. So it's actually quite different how it goes. Yeah.
I'm not surprised that it makes sense. Where can we find you and any final comments?
Thanks a lot for today, Tyson. It's been great. So yeah, please reach out. I'm sure Tyson, you'll put some my details in the chat or whatnot. But I'm on LinkedIn, and you can also reach me via website. I'm sure there'll be a link there as well. So please do. Yeah, more than happy to talk about research. That advice is free, so no worries. Research and marketing in general. In terms of final comments, I'd say, yeah, just embrace research, validate your hypothesis. I get it. It's easy to sort of think things are great and run on your gut, but it's also, good just to engage with consumers, whether that's in the sort of low cost space or whether that's sort of jumping in and doing something a bit more comprehensive which I highly recommend. Because you don't know what you don't know, as they say. So you may be
And,
surprised what someone can actually tell you if they're telling you in kind of like an unbiased context.
and one thing I tell my clients as well, it relates to management, is if you want to launch a new initiative and you just tell your staff to do it, that's not that convincing. But if you say, I've interviewed these people, this seems like a logical process, and that's why I'm making
Yeah,
this decision. It has
yeah,
much more weight in getting buy-in and acceptance from employees to do. So I guess if you do this, you might not be as black as the company if you just do it, do it, do it because I
yeah,
said so. What's the flavor of the
yeah.
week?
Exactly, exactly. No, I think, yeah, like for justifying the decisions, and especially as we mentioned before, Tyson, like when you talk with buyers, right? Like back to the B2B context and sales materials and whatnot, like you need numbers in there, right? And ideally they'd be like numbers with Japanese consumers. And Japanese consumers love this idea. They've tried the concept. This is how satisfied they are, blah blah blah. All those things. If you can include it in there, it's just going to really help with that sell in phase, and also hopefully using that data to support your sellout.
Thanks for coming on, and thanks for coming on a third time.
No worries, Tyson. Anytime.